questions for Ms. Buchanan. Every election cycle, Californians vote on a large and complex amount of ballot initiatives, which most people have difficulty understanding, even for the very most educated people. Are the initiatives, and this is the packet that everyone in California got, nice thin bedtime reading, are the initiatives a sign that the legislature is not doing its job?
Well, I don't know. You know, I suppose on the one hand you could say yes. The initiative process in California is different than most states. Most states will have an indirect initiative process, or they require more signatures. It was designed originally, you know, back to be able to give the people more power and take it away from a government that sometimes made deals with individual industries. I'm not sure it works well at all. I mean, the reality in California with the initiative process is that we've never had an initiative put on the ballot without paid signatures. And if you take a look at where we are, some of these initiatives have been put on the ballot aren't even, you know, we don't have the money coming from California. You have the money coming from other states to put the initiative on the ballot, and the money coming from those, you know, out of state to actually support an initiative. And I just don't think it's healthy. But when you take a look at the polling, people like having the initiative process. So, you know, I would definitely be in favor of initiative reform. I think it's gotten out of hand, and I agree with you. Too often it's like, if I vote yes, am I really voting no? If I vote no, am I really voting yes? And I don't think it's worked. And I don't think our government should be for sale for the person who can write the largest check and put initiative on the ballot. You had T. Boone Pickens, remember, in 2008, from out of state, had his natural gas initiative, where essentially he was asking California to pay about $15 billion in research and development. Fortunately, the voters were smart enough and saw through it, and the initiative was defeated. But I certainly don't think it's a healthy process. However, when you talk to both business and labor, you know, no one really wants to jump in and change it because they all want to use it when it's important to them.
Mr. Phillips.
So in regards to legislators not doing their job in the initiative process, it has gotten out of hand. It's gotten out of hand to the point with the legislators, when you have a proposition like Proposition 31, which is fairness in accounting, we have to put a proposition on the ballot to get our legislators to be fair and to be transparent. Does that take a new law to do that? Something the legislators should be doing all along. And as Joan said, it's usually the one that's a special interest, the group that can get the signatures to do that. So what's the underlying purpose behind Proposition 31, for instance? Prop 31, it creates a regional government that will distribute the funds down to local governments, and it acts as a filter in between Sacramento and the local governments. That's what Proposition 31 is, if you really take a look and look through the weeds of it. But they sell it to you as accountability and transparency. And as Joan said, you look at these propositions and you think, oh, am I voting yes? Is this a double negative or a positive? The way that they phrase these initiatives now are so misleading that you cannot look at it the day of voting and come up with a conclusion just by looking at it, just by looking at the title. You have to get into the weeds of it. You have to seriously study all propositions. And unfortunately, most of our citizens don't. They take the sound bites from TV or from the radio ads, and they go with that. So whoever has the most money gets the most influence. We need initiative reform. We also need government that's going to be accountable without having to pass laws for it.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Next one is to you, Mr. Phillips. Public employee pension costs are forcing a reduction in services throughout the state and have been cited as a factor in a number of the recent municipal bankruptcy filings. What do you think should be done to address pension costs in the state of, public employee pension costs in the state of California?
I'm a union member. I'm a union carpenter, and I support unions. I support the rights for businesses or employees to organize. What's happened with the Public Employees Union, though, is that after they've organized and they've put together their dues, they give their dues to a politician who gets elected, who goes ahead and they pay them. So what's happened in the long term is that good people have voted to give benefits that we can't afford as taxpayers. The only one that's not at the negotiating table between the unions and the state when they're negotiating a deal is the taxpayers, and we can't pay it. So recently, Jerry Brown put out a plan, a 12-point plan for reform of some of the pension reforms. And that was kicked around by the state for over a year before they decided to do anything on it. We need strong pension reform, and it needs to start now, and it needs to start with the people that they are hiring now. And I know that there's a two-tier system that's happening, and there should be a means test on people that they have pensions in there. And again, I'm a union person. I strongly support pensions. But it's to the point now where we can't continue to promise and to give when we don't have the money. It's taking down the state. It needs to be reformed. It's hurting our medical costs for pensioners. What we need to do is really, we need to get into the weeds of our budget, of our finances, to see where our money's at, and so we can really project out on what we can do to help salvage this crushing, the pensions that are crushing the cities and states.
Thank you. I actually, when I worked in the private sector, did actuarial work. So when we received our first actuarial report in 1993 when I was on the school board for our post-retirement benefits, I knew the light at the end of the tunnel wasn't the sun, and which is why I actually sat at the negotiations table all 18 years. I negotiated funding formulas, and we set up irrevocable trust to ensure that benefit and protect it. And it's one of the reasons that San Ramon Valley Unified School District doesn't have the problem of others with respect to post-retirement benefits. So I not only understand the problem, I can get into the weeds on this problem. The reality with the public pensions right now is that at every level, and Contra Costa unfortunately is one of the poster childs in the state of counties that has made some very poor decisions. Their decisions were made back in the 1990s to increase benefits, 1999, and promised a higher level, granted it to all employees, whether they were going to retire in a year or retire in 30 years. And then, you know, that's because we were on the top of the stock market bubble and everyone thought that we were going to get those returns forever. Well, we didn't. And when the stock market turned down, we had the housing bubble, so that was great. That bailed us out a little bit. But now we're at a point where revenues are down and we have a significant problem. What we've done in the legislature, but this is the problem we deal with. The courts have said, if I give you a promise, I can't take that promise away. And you could probably understand that if you're 60 years old and you're planning to have a certain pension, you can't just say, okay, I'm going to give you half of that. So the legislation, I saw the red flag. We went as far as the courts allowed in terms of pension reform, and we've changed it for future employees, but we're very limited in terms of what we can do for existing employees.
Robert's got all the power.
All right. At least he's not throwing it at me.
All right, back to Mr. Buchanan to start. So following on with pensions, do you support governmental entities being able to restructure their pension liabilities in bankruptcy, as some of the cities are attempting to do right now?
It's really not going to be a matter of what I support. It's going to be a matter of what the courts allow them to do. And I think with both San Jose and San Diego, we'll see what the courts allow them to do. Historically, and I know this again from the work I did on school board, the courts have said, I don't care if you have to sell City Hall, you have to pay your pension obligations. So historically, there have been a number of court cases that say, you know, your obligation to your employees come first. So we will see what happens. I do support, though, raising contribution levels because, you know, if you get a benefit, you should be paying for it. And I also believe if you see that contribution on the paycheck, you understand that it's not free. But like I said, I think the courts are going to have the final decision on terms of what you're able to do or not do with respect to pensions for existing employees.
Mr. Phillips.
On pensions, Joan mentioned that she was an actuarial and was on the San Ramon School Board. One of her pensionees, Robert Kessler, receives $15,000 a month. Now, these are funds that are not sustainable. Why was someone allowed to receive such a huge pension? Now, I know that in the last election, she went after Abram Wilson about his city manager receiving a tremendous amount of funds. She's done the same thing. She's rubber stamped and approved these huge pensions that have gotten us into these debts. Now, do we have to sell our public property? Are we to the point now to where we cannot negotiate with a group and say, this is where we are at? Now, the courts probably will have the final decision on it. But how did we get here? We got here because of special interest and people getting in the back pocket of big unions and big labor. That's what's happened. There's no way to avoid it. 96% of Joan's votes has gone in accordance with the labor unions and the teachers' unions. That's not bipartisan. It's not bipartisan at all. So we do need to reform pensions, and we do need to have the cities have the ability to go through bankruptcy and to reorganize it and leave it up to the courts and see if that can straighten out the mess.